We're live. Hello, everybody. So we are here today to build some characters with you guys. Thank you so much for being here. We have quite a lot today to dive into, so we're going to dive straight in. We're doing a workshop today, so if you happen to have a pencil or a pen and a notebook, or you're doing it on your computer or laptop, have all of that ready. So we're going to get some characters created. So I'm going to dive straight into the notes, which our word nerd Megan was wonderful enough to come up with. So we're going to sort of kick things off with a warm up here. So for anybody that was here last week, we all came up with a premise. So maybe you came up with mood or a themes or the goals that you have in place for your story. Or if you weren't here last week, but you just have an idea in mind for Nano that you know that you want to do, maybe pull up your Pinterest board or your playlist, whatever gets you into the mood and feeling inspired. So we're just going to warm up with that and write that down for 5 minutes. Kelly, are you okay to do the stopwatch, or do you want me to?
I can do it.
Okay. We are starting now.
And that's time.
Awesome. Okay. Do we want to, let's see, before we dive into the next one, do we want to maybe share what we're going to be working on for Nano? Anybody excited about what they've written down?
I'm honestly still pretty back and forth on exactly what I want to be doing. So I'm hoping to get some clarity. Today I'm building the characters for the one I'm supposed to be working on. I'm hoping that'll be enough to like get this story to stick for me. But we'll see.
Nice. Des, what about you?
I am nanoing rebelliously this year. I think this is the first year I've ever done it rebelliously. I'm usually like very classic nano, but I'll be finishing my work in progress technically from last nano, but it's only been worked on a few months outside of November. So I hope to finish it and then go back to the beginning and fix that up.
Nice. Kyra?
I am going to be working on a YA contemporary rom-com that's like rivals to romance and takes place at a theme park.
Ooh, very cool. Emma has gone dark, so she gone. Okay, so probably had to deal with baby problems. So I have written down for my thing. My vibe is like a Silent Hill type horror novel with lots of death. There are other things written down, obviously, but I won't go into it too much. But that's kind of my basic thing that I've written for our 5-minute initial warm up. Let's see. So we're going to dive pretty fast into our next one here. So we're going to go into our actual cast of characters now. So not just your protagonist. We're going to think about like, how big is my cast going to be? Protagonist, antagonist, side characters. How many POVs are we going to have? That type of thing. So basically, we're writing down a list of characters who are playing like the larger role in your story. We don't have to stress about naming them right now. We'll have an exercise where we tackle that next. And so here are some guiding questions if you're not sure what your cast is going to look like. So maybe think about what their role is. Are they a protagonist? Are they antagonist? Are they a little bit of both? Maybe you've got an anti-hero. Who are your side characters and who's going to have a POV in the story? How many POVs are there going to be? That's point of view characters. And think really broad strokes for now, because this is just kind of going to be our platform we'll build on from here.
So you can totally this is like a brain dump kind of thing. Just write down anyone you think of that might be useful. You can put together kind of how they're connected later and build them all up. But any characters that fit the plot that you have, if there's anyone you're like, oh, I might need someone who can do this, just write it down, and maybe you won't use them later, maybe you will, but dream big.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. People who live in your world.
And you can always cut characters later too if you like come up with someone and then you're like, maybe I don't want 2 POVs. So this is very much a work in progress and just rough notes you're making. So we're going to do another 5 minutes, and so just jot down the cast, if you will. And starting now.
And that's time.
Awesome. So what did you guys end up with? Do you have like kind of a bigger cast of characters? You just have a hero and a protagonist, or antagonist, I should say?
It's so complicated. So the story I'm writing has two POV characters who essentially exist in different dimensions, different worlds. They're only connected to each other, and then they both need their own cast. So for both of them, I need more people than I have right now, I think. Like one of them's got a love interest and kind of an antagonist, and the other one's got some like very fuzzy peripheral people.
So you kind of have to do double the cast, pretty much. Yeah, that sounds way too complicated. My brain is thinking about that. Des, what about you?
I have more characters than I thought I did. I guess I lost track of some of them while I was writing. So I like in my story, there's 3 different kingdoms, and then there's also like a school that they all go to. So it's basically 4 different areas, and like each area has its own culture and like group of people and like naming system. So there's like a lot of work I have to do that I missed.
What about you, Kyra?
Mine's going to be relatively small. It is going to be dual POV. So each of the love interests gets their own POV. They both have best friends who I think might be cousins with each other. And then beyond that, it's kind of like they're both in the summer program. So I guess there's like someone maybe in charge of that. One of the characters' parents are kind of important. I like having zany side characters, at least one, so I'm sure there will be at least one. But I kind of like to let them just show up and be themselves. So yeah, mine's relatively small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
sounds like the smarter way to go.
Yeah, I was gonna say, mine is small, but I like am side-eyeing it, and I'm thinking like it will probably grow. I have like vaguely like 2 POVs and like a friend / sidekick, and they all have names like, oh, there's the antagonist who's just called Horrible Boy so far, and then the one called who's like the maybe fake ally called Nice boy. So yeah, it's all so well thought out.
Don't forget Bethany and Susan. We helped you name some of these.
Yes, that's right. Susan is like, got something horrible coming to her in chapter 1. So poor Susan. Yeah, Kelly we were brainstorming. She just started calling one of my characters Bethany, and I went, well, now she's Bethany forever. So that's just happening. Actually, names is what we're going to talk about next. I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely one of those like reckless namers that I don't sit down and I'm like, let me think carefully about like the meaning behind each name. It's like, yeah, I mean, Todd probably suits him. It's fine.
You look like a Todd.
You look like a Todd. And if not, I will make you look like a Todd. What about you guys? Are you like that as well? Or do you put more thought into it?
I put way too much thought into names. Every character I name has a meaning behind their name, and the meaning has to relate to something in their character traits. It's a nightmare sometimes, but it's cool in my head. And the habit started when I was like 12, and like I would procrastinate writing by looking on like all the baby naming sites for character names, and I never grew out of that habit. So now I just spend way too much time on naming.
I do. This is what I do. I have the very best Canadian baby name book right beside my desk, and I will literally flip it open and stab, and that's what's happening. And then I'm writing.
Yeah, mine is similar except without the stabbing. Like it really is. I do not put enough thought into it. Like it really is just kind of their parents didn't know what kind of person they were going to be when they named their baby, so they'll just get this name that's in my head. But I'm trying to be better because I do think the way Desiree does it is beautiful, and I love when books have that. I always end up with like, okay, I have to go. I just have to name this character. I'm going to stop writing. So I just name it something, and then it's so hard to rename them.
That's the thing, right? Like I should take more care, but like I'll just be like, this name is fine. And then I can change it later. And then I get to the end and I'm like, no, but she's Janet now. I can't unname her. I can't rename her something else. She's Janet forever. So
I put a lot more care in when I'm writing like speculative fiction. If I'm writing like a contemporary, I'm not quite point and stab. I'm more of like, let me choose something that I really, really like the sound of. But it's like definitely less intensive than if I'm writing spec fic. I feel like I put a lot more effort in.
Okay, you said I put a lot more care in, and I thought you said I put a lot more Karen, and I was like, well, I mean, I guess the name is fine. Like, I have so
all
many
your
Karens
characters Karen.
They're all named Karen, the whole entire cast.
Although, speaking of that, one thing I do try to keep in mind when I'm writing anything contemporary is I do try to look at naming people names that would be appropriate for their actual generation.
Yeah.
Of like, Karens are boomers kind of thing. Of like, these are like parent names. And like, because I the names I default to tend to be like TV characters and stuff, and they definitely don't line up with like if you're writing a YA protagonist right now, like what names 17 and 18-year-olds have right now are not the names that just jump into my head by default. So I do try to give that some thought of like looking up what names were popular in certain years and all of that. But Ellen also recommends the fantasy name generator as well for different types of names, and just if you are like me and don't give it oodles and oodles of thought, they could go a long way coming up with names that you wouldn't have gotten to on the 10 seconds you give yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we're going to jump into, for our next exercise, actually naming our cast that we have created. And I actually have pulled up right now behindthename.com. If you're somebody like me who would like to be a little more careful about what you name your characters, but also don't want to spend a huge amount of time, you can basically either put in a name and see what the meaning is and see if it matches up. Or you can click on the right-hand side where it says names and go to browse names. So that's behindthename.com. Yeah, if you need a little help coming up with a name, and then also want like an extensive list that you can look through if you want. So yeah, let's do 5 minutes and name some characters.
And as you're going through and naming your characters, I find it's helpful to have a second list of names you're not using right now. If a name pops into your head and it doesn't fit anyone you're trying to name, put it on that list, because you're going to come across people that like are just kind of tertiary characters that pop in and out for a scene that need a name that you really don't need to spend a really long time thinking about. It's better just to have here's some names I want to use list. So once Nano hits, you can just pick from that list, cross it off, and carry on without stopping your writing for the day.
That's a really good point, actually. When I at one point was writing like set in the 19th century London type of thing, I just had a whole whack load of names on a list, and I could just pick one. Because it's often a minor character comes along, and you're like, well, what's his name? I don't have to think about it. I just stab the list and then go. Essentially,
it's a lot of stabbing and errors.
Yeah, I mean, that's
practices.
how I pick things. All right, starting at the 5.
We're starting at the 5 or going?
Sorry, it's 5 here. No, it's 5 technically.
Okay, starting now.
Sorry.
Time.
How did everyone do? I think I figured out about 2 names.
Well,
My cast of 6.
Jennifer actually helped me out because I already kind of knew what my 2 main characters were going to be, but I only knew their first names. And she mentioned having a document with all sorts of fun names, just first and last names. And through all of this, I've really just been thinking about first names. Like, oh, they could also use last names. That's probably important. So I did that.
Ooh. That's funny you said that, because now that I was thinking about it, like mine is going to be very like a snobby prep school kind of thing. I'm like, oh, the guys probably would call themselves each other by their last names. I feel like that's a prep school thing to do.
I made it so like in my world there are no last names, so there's no surname. I did that both for ease, and it also makes sense because everybody's like super specific. Like there's a whole naming ceremony that happens when they're babies, so there wouldn't like really need to be surnames. Yeah, I named some new characters that I didn't have named that I liked. I named one of the queens Terra, Terra, and all of the elf names like have to do with like nature and the earth. So I really like that one. And one of the characters, Leaf, he's a prince, and so he needed a sister, and she didn't have a name yet, so I named her Fawn.
Ooh, I like it.
Thank you.
I wanted a really kind of like wealthy sounding name for one of my like kind of snobby guys, and I'm thinking something like Sterling, because that has
That's my character's name.
connotations. Like your main character's name?
My main character's love interest. He is actually my favorite character.
Well, he is the literal worst in mine, so oh no.
That's so funny. I have a sage in my book too, and I know you had a sage in one of yours.
Yeah. Oh, get out of my brain.
Also, Aaron, when in doubt, just add like the third onto any of your characters' names.
Yes, Faustus the Third. I think that sounds pretty good.
And having like multiple middle names, I feel like a lot of like
yeah.
like rich guys have.
I don't know any rich guys, so they're good tips.
I know rich guys typically have very old names because they're typically family names.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of room to get creative. We have nice, respectable names.
Unless you're like Madonna's child or whatever. Okay.
True.
Apple is not a family name. Okay. Anybody else want to share weird names they came up with?
I already had my names. What the male point of view in the book is his name is Grayson. And the way that came about is I love in comics, I love Dick Grayson. I'm not gonna name a character Dick because it's 2020. But I like the name Grayson. I was like, oh, that'd be a cool first name. And then in my head, I'd like also kind of simultaneously been thinking about this like rivals to romance kind of thing that I want to write. And then just like as soon as I thought, oh, Grayson would be like a cool first name, Not Today Grayson popped into my head as the title. So I'm excited about that.
I also wrote a book with a main character named Grayson.
Oh,
Haven't we all? Very good YA character name. I've written a Gray, but not a Grayson. So, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into. I don't know about you, but I have not named my main character. I should do that. But we're going to dive a little bit deeper into our actual protagonist. We're going to do that for a couple of our main characters, but let's start with a protagonist. So in most stories, I'm reading off of Megan's notes here. Oh, perfect. In most stories, the protagonist has a set of 3 things they want from the start: something they want, something they need, and something they fear. So the want and the need are typically not the same thing. And the need is often what the character spends a lot of the time in the story figuring out. And all 3 of the things are something you want to set up early on because they're the things that move the character and thus your story forward. And your character doesn't have to be likable, but the audience does need to understand why they're doing the things they do. So one of the reasons that people say character motivation is so important. Establish the want and fear up front, and that helps that to happen. Morals is something that every character often comes up against. Some kind of moral quandary, something that challenges how far they're willing to go for what they want or need. And if your hero's morals are layered, the story can feel a lot more complex. So if your character has a psychological need that then butts up against their moral problem, the story will be way more compelling. So an example of that is Megan's written down The Bride Test by Helen Wong. And the character, Esme, needs to get out of her current life trajectory. She wants to make somebody called Kai fall in love with her, but to accomplish that, however, her morals are challenged when it seems someone might be willing to marry her without love, which is something she feels is wrong for her and her daughter. And lastly, something to consider is what kind of emotional arc you want your character to have. Truby, Megan, do you know, or sorry, Kelly, do you know what Truby?
John Truby.
Oh, John Truby. What's that book? Megan loves it.
Is it the emotional
Anatomy of Story?
Anatomy of Story, yeah.
Anatomy of
I figured
Story.
that one and the Donald Mouse one confused all the time.
Okay, so the Anatomy of Story by John Truby has a list of classic character arcs that she's listed here to get you thinking about possible paths for your hero to take. So child to adult, adult to leader, cynic to participant, leader to tyrant, and leader to visionary. So any of those things are character arcs. Okay. So we're going to take like 7 minutes, I think, next.
Okay.
To flesh out our hero, and then okay, so she just has underneath here, free write any protagonist inspiration you've had so far. And here are some guiding questions in case you get stuck that Megan has laid out for us. What is a moral problem your character will face? What do they think they need to do to solve that problem? Does your character have any secrets? Will the audience know those secrets right away, or is it a secret they prefer to keep even in their own thoughts? What is something your character wants that might morally challenge them? Where do you want your characters to end up emotionally? So let's give that 7 minutes and do some brainstorming. Starting now.
And there we go.
We are back. All right, how did it go? Did you guys have any awesome inspiration for your protagonist?
Awesome feels like a stretch.
Okay.
For 7 minutes, I did adequate.
Any adequate inspiration for your protagonist? I just know that
The wants and needs are always hard.
yeah.
Of like, what do they think they want? What do they really need? I don't know that about myself. How am I supposed to know this about other people?
It also becomes complicated when your hero is not a traditional hero. Mine is an anti-hero, so what she wants versus what she needs. She wants power. She needs something else, but she's probably going to ignore that and like wreck herself. It's going to go badly. So it's going to be an interesting emotional arc. But yeah, so feels a little different from the classic hero's journey.
That was good for me because I knew that both the two main characters are overachievers. But I kind of wanted to like suss out like how they were both overachievers but different. So I kind of realized that one of them is very like internally driven, like she wants to be the best just because like she likes being the best at everything. Whereas the other one, he wants to be the best because he's afraid of disappointing other people, like his parents, whatever. So kind of being able to focus on wants helped me figure that out a little bit. But they both need the same thing, so that's kind of fun.
I like that. Sounds like there's a lot of great work going on from everyone in the comments as well. Hopefully we'll all be a little further ahead on plotting these Nano books by the end of this and have a good sense of whose story it is we're telling.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. Thank you for all of the comments. We are reading them. You guys have got some awesome inspiration going on there. Next, we do have our antagonist, and we are going to dive right into that, I think. So what are some of the characteristics of your favorite antagonists? So we can definitely think about that going into this. The opponent needs to be part of the story. It's not someone that we can just throw in because viewers need someone to hate or somebody that's just needlessly evil type of thing. They should have something that they want and should be specifically designed to attack your main character's weaknesses. And often it is something that flies in the face of everything the hero is striving for. So inevitably, they're going to butt heads at one point. So similarly, a great antagonist needs to be strong, needs to have a strong, if flawed, moral argument. So think about Killmonger in Black Panther. His ideology isn't necessarily wrong. It's the way he wants to do things that feels wrong to T'Challa. So give your antagonists similarities to your hero. The best antagonists are true foils to your hero, just like your protagonist would look into a mirror and maybe see themselves becoming that person. And that can often be Also a really emotional character arc. Like I think Harry Potter plays into some of those things. I was gonna say spoilers, but I mean, come on, if you haven't read Harry Potter by now. But like, he's literally a piece of Voldemort in him, right? So she took that a little more Okay, can't speak. You know what I mean? And lastly, a compelling antagonist is in the same place as the protagonist. So if your antagonist is on the other side of the country and has no connection to where your hero is, there isn't any immediacy. So a threat delivered via horseback messenger isn't as alarming as, say, a note on your doorstep, left so recently that you can still smell your antagonist's perfume on the air. Thank you, Megan.
Although there's ways to play against that. Of like, I'm thinking about President Snow. Of like, you also want to think about, is this a standalone story, or are you trying to tell a series where you want that antagonist to last a while? Of like, in the first book, President Snow is barely an idea for a bit for Katniss, and then it gets closer and closer, and then he doesn't spend that much time with Katniss, but he's this ever-present.
True. Yeah, I think that if he's not like there physically, he can be there, like frequently remind your character of that person's power. Like even if Katniss doesn't have him physically looming over her, the whole Hunger Games are like happening because of him. So that's a heck of a reminder. But I do like Megan's rather chilling sort of descriptor of the stalker's perfume lingering in the air. Okay, so let's go into about 7 minutes just to be equal to our hero of planning out our antagonist. And if you have a favorite antagonist and you can think of why he or she's your favorite, feel free to comment below so people can kind of read through them. One of my favorites is Warren from Shatter Me, who turns out to be like total plot twist. So I do like an antagonist who isn't what he seems. So let's start now for 7 minutes.
Anytime.
We are back. Awesome. How did it go for everybody? To come up with dastardly villains.
I feel like my antagonists are definitely the part I need to work on the most in this book.
Yeah.
I often struggle with my protagonist's motivations, I feel like. Not necessarily that I just make them like evil with no other reason. They just think evil is like real fun. But normally like their motivation, I need to go back and like flesh out oftentimes. It's just like, it's not enough to like justify all of the horrible things they're doing.
And I always have a hard time like making it like clear enough to the readers what the motivation is too, because like you don't want to have like a villain monologue or something, you know,
Right.
like so it's like how do you like explain what they're or like make it so it's clear what their motivations are without like having them like sit there and explain it or something.
Yeah. And I do, like Ellen said, I'm not sure I have a human antagonist in these stories. They're fighting society in most of these books and adolescence. And I love the kind of like man versus nature stories or like The Martian or stuff like that. The books the plots I have would never end up being like that, but I'd love to write that kind of antagonist. And that sounds like so much fun. Whereas like the stories I have always need those like, there needs to be a person who is fighting against your character. And they're so hard to craft well, but it's really fun to do. It's just difficult.
Yeah, I'm actually experiencing that with like, obviously there's like minor bad guys as well, but my bad guy is sort of like a place, like a setting rather than an actual physical character. So yeah, I find that very challenging. Although it's one of my favorite things, like horror thriller movies that don't have a definite bad guy. It's like a place or a house, or like even disaster movies where the bad guy is a tsunami, right? Like that type of thing. It's still your antagonist pretty much.
Actually, just saying that out loud got me thinking of one of my two POV characters. The world she's in is kind of getting swallowed by magic. So it is this like race against time thing that they can't fight against it, which is why I haven't been thinking of it as an antagonist, but that's the main driving force of like the world is just kind of crumbling in on itself and getting smaller and smaller. And that's the biggest threat to them.
That's your antagonist then.
Yeah.
So we are a little over an hour, so we're going to dive straight into our side characters. So in The Anatomy of Story, John Truby talks about the importance of seeing your characters as a interconnected web rather than just a collection of people who are kind of like independent from each other. He says the most important step in fully realizing your characters is to connect and compare them to each other. So in creating characters, Truby has like a big selection on possible character functions, and Megan, bless her heart, has assembled them here for us. So these are the character types. So the hero / protagonist, of course, the opponents, the ally or friend, the fake ally opponent, and the fake opponent ally. So what that means is, what that means is essentially somebody you think is your friend and turns out to be your enemy, and someone you think is your enemy and turns out to be your friend. AKA Snape in Harry Potter. They definitely through the whole book think that he's trying to kill Harry, and they end up later realizing he's trying to save Harry from the actual bad guy. So that's an example of your fake opponent ally. Well, and both of those things. So in case you're wondering what the heck that is. And then the final one is the subplot character, who is someone who isn't really an opponent or ally, but is tracking a similar path as the hero in some regard. This often highlights what is unique about your hero's own select morals or methods. And I find that really interesting. I kind of think of like Neville Longbottom when I think of this type of thing, because obviously he is an ally, but he's following the same sort of path, or maybe like a similar path that Harry would have taken if he'd chosen different things. And he ends up being this rebel at Hogwarts, right? And then later Harry finds out, same birthday, he could have been the chosen one instead of me. So yeah, I think that's kind of like an example of that. So you guys have any tips before we dive into this on choosing how many side characters you're going to create? A lot, not many.
It's that balance between like who you need for the story and also fleshing out your world. Like you can make the argument that you need every character has to play a role, but not not if you're only looking, yes, if you're only looking at the main characters, but say, again, Hogwarts, of like, there's so many characters, and I love that about the books. It's like, you feel like you're in it because you know who the Hufflepuff characters are in that grade, and they're not that relevant, but you need to have like these Hufflepuffs whispering about Harry in a hallway, and so having them kind of already exist and already have an image of them in your head is really cool. It just, you need to balance how much you have to flesh out each character. There's no set limit on how many, but don't give all of them 18 years of backstory.
I'm like really impressed also by like especially like the first Hunger Games book, where you have like all these characters who are like going to die by the end. So like they're not important enough to be people who are going to last for a long time, but they have to all feel like real people who are trapped in this thing, you know.
And like the book doesn't tell we rewatched the movies recently, and I remember, I don't know if it's the first one or the second one, like as they're I think it was the second one, as they're looking at all of the districts returning victors and like giving them, the two from this region, or what are they called? District. They both won this way. Like in different years, but they have the exact same personality trait. They both do poison. Everyone from this area this. So that felt a little silly to me, whereas in the books I never felt that way, of like they all had these distinct personalities. It wasn't just like, I guess there was a bit of like careers are like this and everyone else is like this.
But it did make sense why people from certain districts were a certain way. Like she at least explained why, like, there were certain people, because they were the ones who like volunteered for it because they had trained.
The careers made sense. There were some of the other ones that were just like, these ones are quirky and these ones are cool.
They make bread. That's your entire personality trait. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try to figure out how to do that balance, like Kelly was saying, because I have something set in like an academy setting as well, where there's like there's a cast, and then obviously there's lots of them, but how many are you gonna name even?
I've got like an academy of like 12 different teenagers, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah. And when there's like 12, like you kind of have to name them all, maybe.
Exactly. It's like with just 12, you have to name them all, and they all have to like have enough of a like distinct personality.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for like knowing all of these characters and like having a Harry Potter level world where there's a lot that didn't get into the books, and she knew all of these details, but you don't have to know it all now. Do not fall down that rabbit hole pre-NaNoWriMo of feeling like you have to know every single detail about your world, every character, their extended family, all of that. Some of it will get fleshed out as you write the book. Some of it will be like, as I'm editing, I realize this is missing. And some of it's just going to be kind of an overtime, getting to know it in your head thing. You do not need to know all of that right now.
All right. So we've got 5 more minutes. We are going to dive into sort of a free writing, making your own. We're doing the side characters now. Let's shorten that up a bit. Do you want to do like 5 minutes maybe for the side characters?
Sure.
Perfect. So we will start now.
And done.
All right. So how did everybody do?
I want to play
You
with
have
this
some
more.
awesome side characters. I know. And actually, that is a great segue because I am giving everybody homework. So we want to go on and create a character web now that we have our entire cast. So how does that character cast connect to each other, and in what ways? So if you've got your whole cast and you're creating a web and you compare their wants, needs, and fears, how do they connect? How do they contrast? Where is their potential for micro tension or like real actual fighting / enemies? If you have any plot ideas, where does each character fit in? Where are they in each scene? How are they reacting to certain situations? How does that maybe butt up against the other characters and how they would react? So yeah, this is all something you can take and run with. Like Kelly said, I definitely want to take this and just kind of like mull it over and play around with it. I know I am going to sit down and like draw an actual web because that really appeals to me. I love the idea of charts, and I want my characters to be like, oh, this person connects with this person and these two are fighting because they have the same motivation, but like a radically different way of getting there. And so, yeah, that is your homework for today. I definitely had a few people saying they only got to flesh out, like a few things. That's totally okay. This is for you to play with and take inspiration from, and definitely like go back and rewatch the video if you need more time with stuff or you need a reminder. That's what the slides are there for. And yeah, thank you, everybody. Anyone have any final thoughts?
I'm trying to look up what we're doing next week.
Plot. So next week we're doing another one of these workshops, and it'll be focused on figuring out like the major plot points of your story so that you'll be ready to start working. Mm-hmm.
All righty. I can't hear Erin.
Thank you for everybody that came and everybody that participated. Oh.
You're good. Keep ending.
Can you guys? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Thank you for everybody that came out and participated. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.